Hello again from a very somber Villa parlor. I had a show all prepared post Southampton, but of course we binned that as soon as the Dean Smith news broke on Sunday morning, my time. We actually recorded a show and had it uploaded on Dean Smith, but only hours later, some comments came out from Christian Purslow and the club, and then the response from Dean Smith, along with some of the rumored candidates for the vacancy. And I thought I really needed to update the show to reflect that new information. But I'm not going to lie to you, this decision has eroded my faith in the leadership at Aston Villa. I've been very complimentary of the owners, and Christian Purslow has made a decision here, in my opinion, on his own that is short-term and short-sighted, and it's been done to quell the hysteria despite what he said in his comments, which I'll share with you a little bit later. And the problem is, if you don't have faith in how this decision was handled, then it's difficult to be optimistic about the next decision that he's going to have to make. And that's the problem. So we're going to dissect that news, look ahead, and for the second time in a short period, I'm toasting Dean Smith with the finest spirit I own. This is a Clase Azul Reposado tequila. This is extremely dear, $200 for a bottle of this stuff, but it's the finest spirit I own. I toast Dean Smith to 3 fantastic years, probably the 3 best years since the Martin O'Neill era in my lifetime, certainly. And let's talk about the decision and what's to come next. I was pontificating on the show that I removed on how football is like a microcosm of society, and it always kind of has been. And one of the challenges we have right now in football is there's a lot of opinion, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of hysteria being pumped out either through social media or by the pundits themselves. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of credibility behind any of it, and nobody knows what's actually happening behind the scenes. And so there's a lot of noise, and we love giving our opinion on social media, even if we have no idea and we have zero credibility whatsoever. We're still gonna beat the drum to our message. Smith out, Smith in, you're wrong, no, you're wrong. And this is what happens and how we create a very polarized society. Do you notice how that's happening in other parts of our lives now as well? And the problem is neither of these groups know anything that's happening behind the scenes, and the media certainly is not helping us either, because basically there is no media anymore. It's just clickbait, garbage. It's just perpetuating the narrative that occurs on social media. And my fear about this decision is that it's a short-term decision, and I'll try to give you some evidence of that to quell the hysteria, quell the noise, or maybe it's quelling a power struggle. Who knows? Because we don't. But sometimes short-term decisions have long-term ramifications, just like in society. And 2 great examples. West Bromwich Albion looked like they were really starting to play for Slaven Bilic. They had a fantastic performance and result at the Etihad. Do you remember? They got a result at Manchester City. Right afterwards, Bilic is fired. They appoint Sam Allardyce, Mr. Relegation Savior. First game against Aston Villa, they lose 3-0. Never really ever recovered or looked the same. Down they went, first time in Allardyce's career. And the other one was Sheffield United, who had such a great first year out of the championship, one of the best first years in a long time. That was all Chris Wilder's doing. A great team he built, a great spirit. Things didn't go the same the second year. Injuries, problems, absentees, just like Dean Smith has been experiencing this year. And for some reason, already doomed to the championship, their owners decide, Wilder, you're out. And the players' response was very, very revealing. And that's one of my fears when it comes to this decision. And part of the reason why we don't get to make informed decisions is because clubs are keeping such a tight lid on information and messaging now. And this is true for all professional sports organizations around the world. They all have their own reporters putting out their own material, which I get. You own your digital content. That's fine, but you're not really getting a very balanced viewpoint. You know, you can't even watch a live pre-match press conference anymore. They record it, edit it, and then put it out with the same 5 people asking the same kind of boring, not very challenging questions. This is controlling the narrative. It used to be the newspaper guy, the radio guy, the TV reporter would all be there watching training. They talk to people that have sources inside the club to have a more well-rounded and more balanced view of the club. And this is all protecting your own self-interests, covering your own ass when things don't go very well, and keeping yourself in a job. And as far as the mainstream media is concerned, well, it's just a lazy group of ex-pros pumping out what they read on Twitter. That's what it's descended to now. And that is the serious setback behind social media. In fact, I think social media is fast becoming the bane of human existence. Just noise, hysteria that gets amplified and picked up by what's left of the mainstream media. They just amplify the noise that they already see. Well, that's trending. Oh, let's run with that because that looks like it's making people mad. But if an executive at a club, for example, wanted to pump out their own narrative, all they'd have to do is pick up the phone and call the local reporter, send the messaging, and boom, before you know it, that reporter obliges. And yet we never really know the dynamics of what is happening in the football club, and most importantly to us, who is accountable to what? Who is accountable for the big decisions that are made behind those walls? Because they'll never admit it when they're wrong. Like, for example, I found it very odd that Nassif Sawiris himself was the one who negotiated Jack Grealish's transfer to Manchester City. Why did he do it? Shouldn't that be the remit of the sporting director or the CEO? We'll never know. Unfortunately, we're going to have to revisit the Jack Grealish situation again because this was one of the statements that came out of Christian Perslow's mouth in relation to the sacking of Dean Smith. However, after a good start to last season, this year, in other words, we're now counting the calendar year, this year, we have not seen the continuous improvement results, performances, and league position which we have all been looking for. For this reason, we have decided to make change now to allow time for a new head coach to make an impact. So what exactly is the common denominator in terms of results in the 2021 calendar, which all of a sudden we're now making as a measurement of success or failure? It's not a season anymore and your standings after a season, it's now a calendar year. But I'll tell you what it is. It's Jack Grealish. Aston Villa have played 35 games thus far in 2021. Jack Grealish appeared in 10 of those games. He was injured for 14. Guess what the record was with him in the lineup and without him? Now, is that Dean Smith's fault? Is it Dean Smith's fault that Jack Grealish was injured 14 games at the tail end of last season? Because if he had appeared in those 4 games, do you think they might have made up the 6 points they needed to get into these European places? I think they would have. And is it Dean Smith's fault that he walked out of the team in preseason, leaving everybody kind of higgly-piggly? And is it Dean Smith's fault or his job to replace a generational talent, one of the best in the league, during the summer transfer window? No, it is not. It was Christian Perslow's and Johan Lange's. Dean Smith is the head coach. That was clearly his title. Sure, he may have a say in recruitment, but not the final say. And I do wonder if there are too many cooks in the recruitment kitchen. And the club naively thought, oh, we could just replace him with 3 players that have good analytics. But they couldn't. They couldn't replace Jack Grealish with 1, 2, or 3 players. If they wanted to replace him with 1 player, they needed to make significant investment. And while Christian Perslow was proudly trotting out Danny Ings, Emi Buendia, and Leon Bailey, a lot of us were looking and saying, well, you're missing the biggest hole that this club has had since Dean Smith arrived in central midfield that you still haven't addressed. And maybe that was a priority that they should have been looking at. And we don't know how much Dean Smith was begging and pleading with the recruitment department to fill that hole. Because do you remember who Dean Smith recommended for this club and went after and almost got when he first arrived? Why, Calvin Phillips of Leeds United. Imagine an Aston Villa team today with a player like Calvin Phillips. Johan Lange was the one who pushed for Morgan Sanson, and that's been nothing but a complete disaster since the last window. And I don't know if he was ever going to be a Dean Smith player, and we'll never know if he was going to be a Dean Smith player because he's not going to be. Do you recall when Christian Purslow proclaimed how Aston Villa had two plans for Jack Grealish, one the staying plan and one the leaving plan? And if I've read this correctly, the staying plan involved making lowball bids for Emile Smith-Rowe and or James Ward-Prowse, two players that Grealish himself said he'd like to play with. And I think those two players might have come had Jack Grealish stayed, but the lowball bids stopped when the club could not ensure that, in fact, Grealish was staying, which would have been a condition of the transfer, I'm sure. But what that tells me then, having already secured Emiliano Buendia, Aston Villa was willing to go well above a $70 or even $80 million net spend to try to surround Jack Grealish with players he wanted to play with. And instead, what happened was they sold him for $100 million, which canceled out the $100 million or so they spent for Ings, Bailey, and Buendia. They weren't willing to go above a zero net spend despite losing a generational talent. And this is what doesn't make any sense to me when they had a giant gaping hole in the midfield that I'm sure the technical staff would have said, we've got to fill that hole. Morgan Sanson is not the guy, at least not yet. And what about this giving time to the new guy in that statement? What time? What time does he have to quell the anxiety at this football club? Aston Villa is closer to a relegation battle right now than a top six push. Secondly, with regards to the Purslow comments, can you please find me another club in the world that has progressed year over year over year over year, 4 straight years? Aston Villa managed to do it 3 straight years. This season, for one reason or another, it doesn't look like we're going to usurp last year's point tally. It's going to take a very, very big turnaround for that to happen. But please, show me in a similar competitive league another club that's gone better, 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 and better again. And if you can, maybe that's the club we should go and poach the manager from for our vacancy. So this whole progress since the beginning of last year statement looks to me like a giant ass-covering exercise for very substandard recruitment during the summer. And lastly, with regards to this Purslow statement, if you've been concerned about results, performances, and league table since the start of this year, why the hell has it taken until now to have a replacement? Why? Your job as a CEO is succession planning, always thinking ahead to something that might happen. Oh, but you've had doubts about results this whole year, basically. But now we're going to go look for somebody and then we're going to give him time to have impact on the squad because he ain't going to have a transfer window until January. This squad needs it. The squad is not good enough. He's going to have time. Dean Smith isn't. Even though it's been 5 weeks since they won at Old Trafford, 5 weeks, and we've panicked. There are red flags flying around Christian Purslow, and they've been there before if you read about his time at Liverpool. He is not a football person. He is an executive. He is a suit. He's a salesman. If he doesn't get this right, his ass is on the line and the clock is ticking. You better get this one right, because there is no time. And I just wonder if he doesn't get it right. Will Nassif Sawiris and Wes Edens go, do you know, maybe we should have kept Dean Smith around. Maybe it was Purslow who's the problem because the summer transfer business during the Grealish time wasn't the greatest. You've asked me who I think should be in charge of Aston Villa, and my answer is consistent. It should be Dean Smith still. Based on his reputation and what he's done in the past, based on the circumstances of the season, he should have been taking charge of the Brighton game, and I still think he's the best person to reignite those players that have let him down this season, and he's yet to have a fully fit squad. And by the way, after Brighton, off to one of the most informed teams in the league in Crystal Palace. What a great job they did in the summer, and what a hire Patrick Vieira looks to be right now. And I don't buy that there's a long list of candidates just waiting to apply for the Villa job. Anybody who's done any due diligence will know that Aston Villa weighs heavy on its managers and that there's been a revolving door of them throughout the past 2 decades. Dean Smith understood the weight and the responsibility. of the Aston Villa job. And imagine what the new guy has to do. He has to come in, assess the squad, figure out who are the best players, figure out the best system, and then good luck against Brighton, a team that's kind of had our number over the last couple of years. Don't win that, and the Smith out people will be new guy out after 4 weeks when things don't turn around. Now, any football club worth its salt is always succession planning. It doesn't wait after making a move like this and then start recruiting. They should always be looking and having people on their radar, people that fit the playing style that you want, people that fit the personality and the culture of the club. And for me, that guy is Peter Bosz, the Dutchman who used to coach Leon Bailey at Bayer Leverkusen. Now, sadly, he's only just moved to Olympique Lyonnais, so I don't think he's up for the move, but there's a guy who was tactically astute and had a beautiful and exhilarating football club to watch. In reading Dean Smith's comments via the League Managers Association, it was clear he was going to take the high road and not fire any parting shots at his beloved and now former club. But he did defend himself somewhat by saying, if I had a full squad to choose from, which he never had all year long, thanks in part to a poor summer of recruitment for a squad that probably, upon reflection, punched above its weight at the beginning of last year and is right now sitting exactly where it probably should. Dean Smith has only done one thing in his career, whether it was Walsall, Brentford, and now Aston Villa. He has left the football club in a better place than when he arrived. That is 100% clear, and he will do it again. In fact, he may look back on this time and say, thank God I left when I did, because the place descended into chaos afterwards. Who knows? That's one way it could go. And it could also turn around. Sometimes there is a bounce when a new manager comes in with a fresh set of eyes and a clean slate. We shall see. But this playing squad has a lot to be ashamed for. And was there chaos in the dressing room? Maybe, probably, there should be. That's football. They're losing. They were playing poorly, whether it was Emi Buendia clashing with Ezri Konsa or the two players who, in my opinion, should be the most ashamed of themselves for their woefully inconsistent performances. And that's the two senior leaders on this team, John McGinn and Tyrone Mings, both of whom I admire as men, but both of whom need upgrading. They have reached their ceiling. There is no more to give as Premier League football players. And what's really sad for me is how it all ended. It ended here at St. Mary's. This was the defining moment, the moment that basically sealed Dean Smith's fate. The ball goes off of Matt Cash's bum and straight into the path of Adam Armstrong. What is Axel Tuanzebe doing there? He's just backing off and letting the shot go through. And the genesis of this goal, we talk about the midfield an awful lot. Here's Emi Buendia, who's late to this ball because he looks like he's running in quicksand as he's looked since he arrived here. Emi Buendia is playing at a championship tempo right now for this club, and I believe he can turn it around, but he cannot play in the middle of the park with John McGinn and Marvelous Nakamba and expect for Aston Villa to beat anyone, quite frankly. And until they solve that midfield problem, I'm afraid we are still going to be drifting aimlessly at sea. For me, the time to try finding those diamonds in the rough in the transfer market using data and analytics, that's over. If Aston Villa is going to crack on, improve, and truly be considered a European candidate, you have got to sign bona fide European quality and pedigree players. And that means opening the checkbook wider. And I'm just concerned that Aston Villa could attract those kind of players in the first place. It's always been a question. Is that the reason why they went the data and analytics and diamonds in the rough route? We'll never know. Will a high-profile manager help? Maybe. Because right now, the youth is not ready to step in and take over yet. And that's another concern I have, by the way. If you're Cameron Archer or Carney Chukwuemeka, are you looking at this and going, well, wait a minute, the guy that was giving us the chance and believed in us is now gone. Am I going to go and sign a contract with Aston Villa right now? And what of the rest of the youth too? All those guys that Dean Smith was nurturing and watching out for and introducing into the squad now and then. I mean, what if they look at this and go, I don't know, I'm going to look elsewhere. And what if there's this exodus from our academy program? That would be a travesty. So in this hire, they need to find somebody who can identify, develop, nurture, and integrate youth. That is a massive part, because you know what happens oftentimes, not just in football, but other sports. The first job of the new guy coming in is to keep the job and win games. And that sometimes means not risking playing youth. Now, this is just me looking at it anecdotally, but the Smith Out Brigade, which is very vocal and has dominated social media for the past couple of months, appears to be comprised largely of a younger demographic that's impatient and instant gratification oriented, and they truly believe that change for the sake of change will somehow propel Aston Villa back to the upper echelons of the Premier League, which is neither realistic or probable given the playing squad that we've seen through 11 games. Whereas I've seen a lot of criticism for the Smith dismissal by people my age or older, or in the older age demographic, who just want a steady pair of hands on the wheel, the benefit of some time and patient planning. I said it at the beginning of the show, football is a microcosm of life and society. And right now, football is very instant gratification oriented, very greed oriented, and very impatient. And I just hope in this case that what appears to me to be a short-term decision doesn't end up having long-term negative ramifications.